Welcome to episode 5 of the Burt and Urbin show. I am Nick Burt. You will see Zach Urban once he starts talking because this is on Zoom. But we have a huge game this weekend. So huge, it's the only game we're going to focus on. Zach, is it the UConn game this weekend?
It is the most exciting game in all of sports this weekend. No, just kidding. We will be talking about the Michigan State versus Michigan game. Which is this Saturday at noon in East Lansing. Both teams 7-0. Michigan ranked number 6 in the nation. Sparty ranked number 8. And that'll be our only topic. It's so important that it deserves its own episode.
I mean, you couldn't have said it better. It's so important that it deserves its own episode. The first time these two rivals are meeting when both teams are ranked in the top 10, it's monumental. Basically every college game or college pregame show is in town this weekend. Fox Big Noon setting up at the STEM building right outside the student gates at Spartan Stadium. You have college game day setting up at Ralph Young Field, which is basically on the other side of the parking lot to the STEM building. So good luck to Sparty and the cheerleaders running back and forth between the two shows. You have the Barstool, I don't know, college football show or whatever it's called. You have that setting up at Cedar Village, which just sounds like a huge cluster for you. So it's just huge. It's huge.
Yes, truly. The media is definitely buying into this game as much as I think the fans are. Much excitement surrounding this game. A lot of potential implications for what the playoff could look like in the future, especially from who comes out of the Big Ten. So really exciting atmosphere around here in East Lansing right now.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a dreary day when we're recording this on Friday, rain just everywhere. But you can feel the energy in the city as it's starting to build and simmer up for that huge explosion at 12:05 for kickoff tomorrow, Saturday. Let's just get into the game. So like I said, this is the first time they're both meeting when they're ranked in the top 10. It's the first time since 2010 that they will both have undefeated records going into the game. Both teams were 5-0 at the time in 2010. Michigan State ended up winning that game. This is going to be a huge test for both teams, as both of them really haven't faced that tough of opposition this year. Obviously, both teams have two common opponents, Northwestern and Nebraska. Nebraska played both of these teams close. They had a lead in the fourth quarter against Michigan. They went to overtime against Michigan State. And then the other common opponent was Northwestern. Both teams handled them pretty well. So it's really going to be interesting to see how these two teams face off against each other, since they really haven't played that tough of an opponent yet.
Yes, I completely agree. I think both these teams have very similar schedules, and as we'll get into, also very similar rosters. But when you look at the schedules, like you said, the two common opponents, which both teams face both opponents very similarly. And then you look at on Michigan State's side, which at the time was seen as a Mel Tucker defining win against Miami in Miami. And as we see now, that victory, I don't think means nearly as much as we thought it did at the time. At the time, Miami was ranked 24th in the nation. And of course, obviously now their whole season is flipped upside down. So truly both Michigan State and Michigan have not played anyone, I would say, up to their caliber.
Yeah, and let's start in on the offensive side of the ball. For both of these teams, it's the run game. You have Michigan's tandem of Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins, both ranked top 35 nationally in rushing. And then you have for Michigan State, you have Kenneth Walker, who's leading all of the FBS in rushing yards.
Yeah. When you look at the Michigan duo, they're fifth in the nation with just over 250 rushing yards a game. I mean, that's just incredible. The way they play reminds me actually of the Browns, the Cleveland Browns. The way that Kevin Stefanski offense, double running back, ground and pound, make it easier for your quarterback. That is what Michigan is doing. Really old school football, really in your face, in the trenches. And kind of when you look at Michigan State's running attack, it's a very different approach. And I think that solely has to do with Peyton Thorne's ability as a thrower, because they're not nearly as much of a ground and pound. They're more of a finesse running game. So two different styles of running attacks, but still very effective and very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, both of them are very dangerous. It's going to be interesting to see how both defensive lines can set up to try to stop that run, because it's going to seem like that this game is going to be decided on who can throw the ball the best. And both teams, they have decent quarterbacks. They're not good, but they're not bad. So you have Peyton Thorne on the Michigan State side. He has that deep ball threat, but some of those like mid to short passes, he's kind of iffy on. And then you have Caden McNamara for Michigan, who can do those like short passes, but he doesn't have that deep ball threat.
Yeah, and going back to Peyton Thorne, you look at his stats, 1,700 yards, 15 touchdowns, easily one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten. And then compared to Cade McNamara, he doesn't have the strong arm like Thorne has, or the big play ability, but he also is just very consistent, very good game manager, not going to make a ton of mistakes. So, I mean, both teams have a very similar roster, very similar, especially on the offensive side, very similar quarterbacks, very similar running game. So I think this one actually comes down on the offensive side of the ball. I think it comes down to the wide receivers. Obviously, the beginning of the Michigan season, they had a huge loss in Ronnie Bell, major veteran presence, major key player on the offensive side of the ball, which I think has diminished how well Caden McNamara and the passing game has been this season. And then you look at Michigan State. You have Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor. Both of those guys just unbelievable. And I feel like those wide receivers will be key to this game, as you just talked about.
I mean, I believe, if my stats are correct, after the loss of Ronnie Bell, like you mentioned, for Michigan at the beginning of the season, I believe Hassan Haskins has the most receptions or receiving yards for Michigan right now. And he's their running back, obviously. So I think it is going to take a deep ball threat like Jaden Naylor or Jalen Reed for something to swing in this game.
Yeah, completely. And kind of moving this to the defensive side of the ball, I mean, we both know that the Michigan defensive line, very good. Aiden Hutchinson, David Ajabo, unbelievable pass rush and run stopping duo. I mean, those two have 11 sacks combined, 52 pressures, a top 10 pass rush in the nation. And then you look at Michigan State. I mean, you got Jeff Pietrowski and Jacob Penasuk, and they've been unbelievably underrated this season, I think. So I think really the pass rush will be key. I think both teams will do a very good job stopping the run.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the run defense for Michigan. They're just allowing 3.6 yards per carry this season. Out of all the 7 opponents Michigan has faced this year, they've only gained a total of 813 yards on 229 carries. That's an average of 116 yards per game. Michigan's held both Washington and Wisconsin to under 50 rushing yards. The Wisconsin one's shocking to me because it seems like all they do is run now if you watch some of their games. And last week, I believe they had like 83 total running yards, Northwestern did against Michigan, and one of those was a 75-yard run.
Unbelievable job that both of these teams have done. And I think one of these things, when you look at this game, I cannot imagine what Jim Harbaugh and Mel Tucker are going through to game plan for this, because there is so much to worry about between both teams. You look at the running game for both teams. How are both teams going to respond to the other's running game? How are these two teams, how are their offensive lines going to respond to two very good defensive lines? Just a lot of small details will need to go into game plans in order to be victorious, because as we've said multiple times, these are very similar rosters, very similar strengths. So I think whichever coach has the better game plan and better adjustments coming out of halftime will have a huge advantage in this game.
Yeah, let's move on to the coaching side of it really quick. So there's obviously on the Michigan State side, there's the rumors obviously that are out there after LSU fired Ed Ogeron, that Mel Tucker is maybe on a top list for LSU. I don't. It seems like that the media, especially the Detroit media, I'm not going to go off like Mike Valeni here and say, the blue wall and all that, but there's definitely a Michigan leaning in the Detroit media. They're trying to push this narrative as somewhat of a distraction for Michigan State. But I think from what I've seen so far, Mel is keeping this like very like under wraps and not letting it become a distraction for the team.
Yes, you've seen some of his interviews that he's done, and he really has not let it bother him. One of his responses was like, I am only focused on this week. And that was it. Not much else said on behalf of Mel Tucker. And I do think there is a major component that you kind of just touched on with the fact that all of this is being talked about at an extreme level the week of the Michigan game. I think there is not that is not a coincidence. That is being pushed as a narrative to distract the players and distract the team.
And then on the other side of the ball, you have Jim Harbaugh, who he got a contract extension in the offseason, but it wasn't because his pay got cut. He went from like 7 million to like 4 million, and he has a very low buyout. So if he somehow loses this game, how do you come back from that? Because now you're 0-2 to Mel Tucker, who came in here and it was a mess. You had what D'Antonio left over, then you had COVID, and then you end up you had a canceled season that ended up coming back, but then you lose to Mel Tucker in his second game as head coach at Michigan State with the team he probably barely knew. So how does Michigan and Jim Harbaugh come back from this if they lose, knowing that most likely at the end of November, you're losing to Ohio State again?
Exactly. That's such an important factor. When you look at the Michigan fan base, every year, people are not excited yet for this football team. Every year they sit and wait around the Ohio State game, because every single year under Jim Harbaugh, it has been, okay, let's win all of our games, look dominant, be in the top 25, and then lose to Ohio State and not get anywhere near a playoff. And so I think this is a really tricky game because for both sides of the football, we don't truly know how good each team is, especially when looking at the schedules that they faced. So this is the true big picture. We're going to learn a lot this weekend. And I think if Michigan does win, then maybe the hype and excitement will begin. But if they lose, their season's pretty much over.
Yeah, we're gonna bring back a mention of Mike Valeni here. Listening yesterday, he did like I don't kind of like an autopsy on both fan bases right now. He said with the Michigan fan base, outwardly, they're obviously all cocky, like, oh yeah, we're gonna win this game. Like we're back, we're Michigan, you know, all that. But inside, they have that fear that if they lose this game, it's over. Like there is no coming back from it. Like unless you somehow pull off a miracle and win the Ohio State game, which that would literally be a miracle if they did that. It's just it's amazing to me, I guess, because then you go on the Michigan State side, things like he mentioned, like there's that like the outward feel is like, yeah, you know, we're getting there, we probably got this game, but that inner feeling inside is that, you know, it's Cinderella and it's 11:59 and, you know, we're about to come back down to earth here. So for both sides, like this is one of the most evenly matched games I think I've seen between these two teams. And it's just, I don't think there's like deep inside on both sides. I don't think anybody's confident about winning this game.
Oh, yeah, I truly don't know how much confidence is in, especially the U of M side. I mean, like you just touched on, they're under Jim Harbaugh. He's been winning. He has a winning percentage similar to the legendary head coaches at Michigan, but he's not getting the big wins that they had. He's not getting the wins against Ohio State. He's not getting the majority of wins against Michigan State. Those are the big games. Those are the ones you need to win if you want to be compared to the legendary coach legacies of the past at U of M. And I just don't think that it's there with Jim Harbaugh for some reason. He's never been able to have a true quarterback, like truly good quarterback under his time. I mean, you look back, Shea Patterson, he was okay. Like these guys he's had are just, he's supposed to be bringing in the best recruits in the country. And yet the quarterback whisperer cannot whisper to quarterbacks. I feel like if this season does not work out, it's the end of the line for Jim Harbaugh, maybe.
Yeah, and I mean, we didn't personally because we were not alive yet, but we saw kind of the same thing happen with John Cooper at Ohio State in the late 90s. He went 9-2, 10-1, those kind of seasons, but he could never get over the hump and beat Michigan. That's like the overall like thing that you have to do when you're a head coach at one of these schools. You have to beat your rival. And someone like Jim Harbaugh, who can't beat Ohio State to save its life, and on the off chances he beats Michigan State, I mean, not to like make excuses here, but the times he beat Michigan State was not good.
Yeah, a lot of the teams under D'Antonio, especially towards the end of his stint, were not very good. I mean, you had Ryan Lewerke as QB1. I mean, just not good football teams. And especially when you look back at the good teams that D'Antonio had, they were either competing, if not winning those games.
I mean, even last year, both teams were not good at all. But Mel Tucker walks into the big house and comes out with a win. I mean, that's a game that Harbaugh most likely should have won. Obviously, they ended up winning the same amount of games as Michigan State did last year. But again, that it's a wash because it's a COVID year. It doesn't like it matters, but it doesn't. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out on Saturday. One thing I did not mention when we were talking about the run game is that the team with the most productive ground attack has won 45 of the last 51 games in this series, with the only exceptions being last year, 2016, 2015, 2007, 2004, in 1995. So the run game is going to be a huge part of this game tomorrow or Saturday or whenever you're watching this.
Yeah, and this rivalry as a whole is built on old-fashioned football. It always has, it always will be. Whoever can perform the fundamentals the best, which sounds basic. It sounds really basic. Oh, do the fundamental things in football. But those are the disciplinary things. Those are the things that you work on week in and week out. Good football teams can do it. Bad football teams cannot. And that's just what this rivalry is built on. And I think that's what also gives the rivalry such a charge. It charges up the players, it charges up the fan base because it's smash mouth football a lot of the time. And I think as fans, that's a great thing to see.
Yeah, obviously Big Ten football has its own like kind of meaning to people in different places, but it is that run attack because it's that old school type football. I mean, we saw it last week with the Penn State Illinois game, the one that went to 9 overtimes. That game was based on the run basically. So it's a it's a ground and pound type conference. So it's just going to be it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Another interesting note I saw was that in the series history, games that were decided by 7 points or less, U of M leads that record 14-12 to 5. I did not expect this to be that number to be as close as it is, because I feel like there were a lot of games like a long time ago, like we're talking like the 50s and 40s and stuff like that, where like they were just complete blowouts. So I was actually kind of surprised to see that there were that many games decided by 7 points or less.
Yeah, that's a really interesting stat. And like you said, it kind of goes to the idea of just ground and pound Big Ten football. And I think a lot of that has to do with the legacies that a lot of these Big Ten football teams have. I mean, when you look at an NFL team, let's say the Steelers, that defensive identity has been a legacy mark. A lot of teams, especially a lot of dynasties, they have that, and that is the identity that team faces even into the modern day. And I think that's the same thing that happens when you look at these teams. I mean, Michigan, that was the style of offense under Bo Schembechler, the iconic ground and pound, beat 'em up football. And it truly does just identify a whole legacy. I know Jim Harbaugh, he's trying to get back to that style of football. And he's keeping that legacy alive. So it truly is definitive in this rivalry and within the Big Ten.
Another thing I forgot to bring up when we were talking about the offense and the defense, I think another key point in this game will be the team that can pull off that trick play that they like need to either get back in the game or just push the game over the edge. So like for Michigan State, you have obviously the play that I think they've loved the most this year, the flea flicker. But I kind of feel like that's starting to die out because teams are now preparing for it to come. So I would not be surprised if like the Michigan State calls the play this weekend and Michigan like knows what's going on like before it happens because what it's been completed 3 times, I believe. I believe they've only tried it 4 times. So I think that that's in the back of Michigan's defensive mind. But then for Michigan, I think that trick play possibility is putting in JJ McCarthy at quarterback because he's only played in 5 games and he's only had 19 pass attempts, but he has 212 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's a very big wild card here because there's not a lot of film on him. But for me, I think he's the best quarterback on the team right now.
Yeah, and I know the team struggles with figuring out who will be the better fit. Obviously, McCarthy, new 5-star recruit, and I don't like you look at it, like you said, not much film. You bring them in, you don't know. Michigan State will have no clue what could be happening, and then looking at the Michigan State side of it, you have the flea flicker, which I think if they start off the game with a flea flicker, Michigan will be ready. But maybe if you sprinkle that in while you're driving down the field, it gives it a different look than if you just start to fire right off the bat. But then also another point I want to touch on is the special teams of Michigan State. I mean, Jaden Reed as a returner, unbelievable, one of the top in the country. If he can get a few good returns, that'll be game changing. Flip the field. That it would be huge, especially for a Spartan team that struggles to get first downs at some points. We've seen them kind of shut down. They've had some stupid penalties on the offensive side of the ball, including holdings and false starts. And it feels like when they get one of those, it just accumulates and keeps going. So I really think that special teams will play a major role in helping out this offense that at times has struggled.
I think you hit on 2 keys right there that is going to affect this game. Special teams, because Big Ten football, like we said, it's a lot of running. It also ends up being a lot of punts too. So you got to make that play on the special teams that can turn around the game. But then another thing you pointed out was the penalties. Michigan State, I mean, they get a lot of penalties on offense. It seems, especially in the Indiana game. Obviously, they had a bye week. You get time to work that stuff out. But we're getting into the 8th game of the season. You can't be jumping off sides or false starting like every 5-10 plays. So it's going to be who can limit those dumb penalties. Because Michigan, they seem like they got a good sense of what their team is going to do, and they're not getting as many penalties on them as it seems like Michigan State is.
Yes, for sure. And I like you just brought up, I think a key is the bye week Michigan State has. Good coaches, whether it's in the NFL or in college football, good coaches will find a way to rest their guys up while also keeping them ready and getting them ready for the game and coming out hot. Because a lot of times teams that do not come out hot coming off a bye week, they look sluggish. They look like they're tired. And if that happens, I think Michigan State will lose this game. However, I think Mel Tucker is doing it. I assume he's probably doing as good of a job as he can, is keeping his guys fresh, keeping them ready, keeping them on their toes. And that's what needs to happen when you are coming off a bye, especially into rivalry week.
Another thing I wanted to talk about on the defensive side of the ball, both of these secondaries seem almost like they're not good. So that might be another key in winning this game of what offense can exploit that weakness.
Yeah, and I think when you look at that weakness for both teams, I think the benefit of that goes more towards Michigan State than Michigan. And that is solely on the fact that Michigan State can push the ball down the field. Peyton Thorne has done a good job on the deep throws this season. Very good deep ball thrower. And I think that helps Michigan State out more than Michigan. Obviously, last year, that was a big factor as well. A lot of Michigan State's big plays were throws down the sideline and into single coverage. And Michigan corners did not look good in that game at all. So I think that could be another key for this Spartan offense to do well.
Okay, so before we get out of here, let's take a quick prediction look at this game. As of what now, 3:10 p.m. on Friday, the weather is looking like it's going to be 50 degrees at kickoff with a 30% chance of rain, but that is only for the 12 o'clock hour. It looks like the rest of the game will be dry. The current spread in the sports books is Michigan is a 4-point favorite and the over under is 50. Zach, what are you thinking about with this game?
I'm taking the under. I know you never take the under, but I'm taking the under on this one. I like both defenses a lot. It'll keep this game low scoring. And in terms of points, I have Michigan State winning 24-21.
Very
3-point victory for the Spartans.
Very interesting prediction right there. I'm going to agree with you on the under. I think both of these defenses stop a lot of drives, and I do think this will be a low-scoring game. I am going to take, oh man, it hates for me to say this. I'm going to take Michigan 17-14. I think this will be really low scoring, and I think Michigan just has that extra oomph to get it over the edge.
Yes. And right now, ESPN has Michigan with a 56% chance to win the game as well. So just a slight edge. And of course, as we talked about, very even. I think I'm fine with a 6.6% underdog status. And I'm really excited for this matchup. These two teams are so similar in their roster buildup, as well as what they have accomplished this season. I think both teams are going to be fired up. This is one of the biggest games in the history of the rivalry, and it should be an unbelievable matchup to watch.
Completely agree with you on all those points. This should be, it is probably the biggest matchup between these two teams. It's the most evenly matched both of these teams have been against each other, I believe, ever. I'm just hoping for a good game, basically. I mean, of course, since we just all said this, how it's going to be so close, one team's going to blow out the other because that's just how things work.
Yeah.
So I hope that it's going to be a good game.
Yeah, it should be a good time. Hopefully the weather prevails and people will be able to burn their couches.
It's going to be a wild scene in East Lansing starting. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if people are already tailgating somewhere. Obviously, yes. The Michigan State lots are not open until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, but I'm sure somewhere people are already tailgating.
Yes.
It says it opens at 7, but I'm sure they will probably be open a lot earlier. And it's just going to be a wild scene in East Lansing when we're recording tomorrow. So it's going to be a fun atmosphere.
Certainly. Number 8, Michigan State at home against U of M, number 6 in the nation, both teams undefeated. That was our thoughts on it. Of course, we'll both be at the game, so I'm sure we'll have a breakdown of what we saw. And yeah, you have anything else to add, Bert?
I don't think I have anything else to add. Just go green.
Go white. Thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next time.